There's a story you've been living your whole life without ever being told, a story older than agriculture, writing, cities, pyramids, or kings. This story isn't about war or conquest, but sounds more like a deal, not the kind made in a marketplace, but the kind forged around a fire in the dead of winter while hanging on to dear life by the skin of your teeth. The other party in this deal, as you'd expect, wasn't human, and I'm not talking about a deal with the devil at the crossroads. They simply had sharper teeth, better hearing, and superior eyesight, especially at night, and they used to eat you for lunch. But someday, for reasons unknown, this status quo changed. Roughly 30,000 years ago, deep in the Paleolithic wilds, a quiet revolution took place where two species, once enemies, made a truce. One species would trade loyalty for leftovers, the other safety for scraps, and both would gain far more than anyone could have foreseen. If we evaluate the success of this deal by the number of individuals from both species, now alive and thriving, it likely ranks as one of the most successful deals ever made. That ancient deal gave us something no other creature on Earth had ever managed, an alliance with one of our own predators. This is the story of how humans and dogs changed each other and together reshaped the world. The wolf at the edge of the fire. To understand how this all started, we need to rewind to a time when humans were just another struggling primate, trying to outsmart nature. Frankly, 30,000 years ago, we weren't very good at it. Back in the Upper Paleolithic, we actually had quite a hard time. The climate of the period in Europe saw dramatic changes, including the last glacial maximum, the coldest phase of the last glacial period. It lasted from about 26,500 to 19,000 years ago, being coldest at the end before relatively rapid warming. During the maximum, most of northern Europe was covered by an ice sheet, forcing human populations into refugee areas like modern Italy, the Balkans, parts of the Iberian Peninsula, and areas around the Black Sea. On top of this harsh climate was the fauna. Choices for prey were plentiful but nonetheless dangerous, including aurochs, woolly mammoths, and rhinos, animals that, coupled with rudimentary hunting technology composed mostly of spears, could mean certain death. We also fell prey to large predators. In valleys, we faced cave lions and cave hyenas, while in forest areas, it was even worse, being brown and cave bear territory. At the time, the total human population on Earth was estimated to have been between 1 and 5 million people. That's not just one city's worth of people, it's humanity entirely, spread very thinly across continents, living in small bands of hunter-gatherers, likely 20 to 50 individuals per group. They were moving with the seasons, chasing game and survival. To put it in perspective, a modern football stadium can hold 100,000 people, meaning all of humanity back then could fit into 50 stadiums or fewer. If you really want perspective, more people attended the celebration for General Douglas MacArthur after he was relieved of duty by President Harry Truman. More people waited for Pope John Paul II at World Youth Day 1995. More people celebrated the Argentina national football team's victory at the 2022 FIFA World Cup. That's how incredibly few people existed on Earth at the time. Back then, the world consisted of vast empty spaces, where a single human footprint might not be followed by another for weeks. This is a sense we've largely lost unless you venture daily into space or the abyss. Yet somehow, from those scattered few, a relationship was born with a predator, no less, that would grow to touch billions of lives. Maybe the reason this deal was made is that you couldn't really count on many others to help you out. So you had to find someone who would come no matter what. Homo sapiens weren't dominant yet. We lived in small bands with no farming and no metal, just stone tools, fire, and whatever we could hunt or scavenge. People were insanely lean back then, and had physiques comparable to those of modern athletes. And I mean everyone. Out there with us were wolves. They too lived in packs, ate whatever they could manage to find, and relied on communication as a crucial part of survival. At some point, these common traits would bring us closer than we ever thought possible to another species. These wolves were not the shaggy golden retrievers you might be picturing. At first, it was quite literally more of a win deal than a process of taming. We're talking lean, ruthless Pleistocene wolves built for long-distance killing. They competed with us for the same prey, and hell, sometimes they competed for us. Yet not all wolves behaved the same way. Some were bolder, others curious, and a few lingered near human camps not to attack, but to sniff out scraps, not really fearing the big monkey next to the fire. What could it do anyway? No fangs, no claws, no fur. In this Pleistocene world, we were basically helpless. Now, here's where natural selection steps in, because those wolves that kept respectful distance from humans got to eat without getting speared. In the saying survival of the fittest, being the most fit here involved socialization and being less aggressive towards potential lunch, which is quite counterintuitive. Over generations, these proto-wolves, the ones less aggressive and more tolerant, were rewarded. As they got closer to our fires, they stopped being just wolves. We didn't domesticate dogs by capturing and breeding them, they domesticated themselves in a way. You don't really tame a creature that could kill you with one bite to the neck, and whose instinct is pretty much to do so the first chance it gets. They evolved to read us, follow us, and understand us, and we perhaps unknowingly selected for those traits every time we tossed a bone. It was the original win they got calories, and we got early warning systems for eaters, and one day, hunting partners. Or at least that's one theory. A more recent one suggests that the first wolves to ever have been domesticated were pups, either found in their den and taken away, or purposely stolen from their parents. Of these two theories, one suggests it's pure luck, while the other implies intent of domestication and a thought process complex enough to picture situational uses for these domesticated wolves. Once again, we unfortunately don't quite have the definitive proof that will tip the scales in favor of one or the other, but the results are here. From strangers to strategists. Once the first trust was built, something remarkable happened: cooperation. Humans began to notice that dogs had a far better sense of smell and could track prey by scent from miles away. Dogs realized humans could finish the kill without taking any risk themselves, so why bother? Together, they became a hunting machine neither could have managed alone or even in a group of just our own kind. Soon, this cooperation spread beyond hunting. Dogs, having kept their territorial instincts, started to protect camps, barking at intruders, whatever they might be. They sensed danger coming from other predators like bears, big cats, or even other humans with more malevolent intentions. A human could finally fall asleep with a dog nearby and not fear becoming prey. Very rapidly, a group with dogs piled up competitive advantages over others that didn't have any. Dogs enabled us to be more mobile during hunts, more coordinated, and better fed than others. In the brutal lottery of Pleistocene Ice Age survival, that mattered. This wasn't just companionship, this was an arms race. The tribes with dogs were faster, safer, and more successful, while the ones without encountered more risk during hunting sessions and in their daily lives, slowly getting outcompeted. You can think of early dogs as a kind of living technology, a biological tool humans plugged into their survival strategy. I mean, if you've ever played any game where you could get a non-human companion, you know what I mean for sure. The results were so successful we never looked back. The first domestication changed our brains. Most animals we've domesticated came after we settled down goats, cows, chickens. Those came with humans settling down and the birth of farming around 10,000 years ago, because we could keep them in place, restrict their movements, and do selective breeding. But dogs are another story. They were there first, even before humans started to adopt a more sedentary lifestyle. They didn't just change how we hunted, they also changed us as a whole to a level we would not even have apprehended. Researchers studying domestication have uncovered something strange. When you selectively breed animals for tameness, you don't just get friendlier behavior, you get a full-body makeover. Traits like floppy ears, shorter snouts, smaller teeth, softer features, and even changes in hormone levels and brain structure tend to show up together. This phenomenon, known as domestication syndrome, was most famously demonstrated in the Siberian fox experiment led by Soviet geneticist Dmitry Belyaev in the 1950s. Over generations of selecting foxes purely for friendliness toward humans, his team, later led by Lyudmila Trut, found that not only did the foxes grow tamer, but they also developed curly tails, spotted coats, and a surprising eagerness for human attention. The leading explanation behind this cluster of traits is the neural crest cell hypothesis proposed in a 2014 paper by Adam Wookins, Richard Wrangham, and William Tecumseh-Fitch. Neural crest cells are a group of embryonic cells that influence everything from pigment to skull shape to the development of the adrenal glands. So when selection pressure reduces stress reactivity, essentially making animals less fearful and aggressive, it inadvertently tweaks a wide array of physical features, too. But here's where the story turns inward. In that same 2014 study, expanded in later work by Wrangham, scientists proposed that Homo sapiens may have undergone a process of self-domestication. Unlike animals bred by humans, we may have selected among ourselves for individuals who were less reactive, more cooperative, and better suited for complex social life. Compared to our extinct cousins like Neanderthals, modern humans have flatter faces, smaller jaws, reduced brow ridges, and more juvenile or gray cell features, all consistent with the traits seen in domesticated species. Genomic comparisons even suggest that some of the same genes involved in tameness in dogs and foxes show signs of selection in humans. On the hormonal level, domesticated species, including possibly ourselves, tend to show lower baseline cortisol, the stress hormone, changes in oxytocin and serotonin systems, which regulate bonding and mood, and less reactive amygdalas, the brain's fear centers. In short, self-domestication may have helped humans become not just more social, but more empathetic, emotionally intelligent, and able to cooperate in large groups, traits that underpin everything from storytelling to civilization. So, the next time you look at a dog's floppy ears or a human's baby-like face, remember taming the wild may have been a two-way street. The expansion pact to humanity. Now, you might be wondering, if this alliance was so revolutionary, where's the proof? Why don't we find more sites with early dogs in graves, for example? Well, we do find some of that. For example, the remains of 26 dogs have been found across 4 different sites in the northern Iberian Peninsula, sometimes going as close as sharing their graves with humans. We've also found 14 1,000-year-old graves in Bonn Oberkassel where dogs were buried with humans, not as tools but as family. One puppy was laid to rest in a grave, cradled in its owner's arm. Treating them as family isn't just some weird social media trend you can see on Instagram or Dogmum. It goes way back. Across ancient Europe and Asia, cave paintings and carvings show dogs running alongside hunters, indicating they were important enough to be represented in mural paintings in dark caves lit by torches. In the Americas, dog remains pop up just a few centuries after humans first arrived, meaning they probably brought them along when crossing the Bering Strait. Remember, this is before the wheel, before writing, before agriculture. Dogs were already essential for human lifestyle. They carried supplies, guarded the young, and chased off predators. In the Arctic, they'd one day pull sleds. In the desert, they'd track game, and in every climate in between, they adapted with us. No other domesticated animal has this range, and no other domesticated animal chose us first. The missing wolves. Here's something eerie: the wolf population we think dogs descended from just doesn't exist anymore. Extinct. Poof. That entire branch of ancient wolves, the ones that likely gave rise to dogs, vanished. Somewhere along the line, their wild cousins disappeared, and their tamer descendants survived. In a way, that might be inherent to why this species of wolves and no others came to us in the first place. The ones that remained wolves maybe just didn't have what was required for them to survive in the wild anymore, especially if they stayed in the wild but started to depend on humans. As humans started to develop a dependency towards dogs instead, that maybe was the cost of the deal. To gain a place by our side, dogs gave up their place in the wild. They became dependent, vulnerable, loyal to a fault. But we shaped them too. We bred dogs for speed, strength, loyalty, size, and yes, even silliness. From the massive Mastiff to the yipping Chihuahua, all dogs today are variations on one extinct wolf. That's what 30,000 years of collaboration and selective breeding can do. The consequences of friendship. But this story isn't just about the past, it's still unfolding. Dogs didn't stop evolving when we invented civilization. Actually, their biological evolution accelerated even more at the turning point of the 19th and early 20th centuries. The start of industrialization and colonization kind of gave us the vibe culture over nature and provided us with a sense of rightfulness and tempering with nature's way. This applied first to our closest and first friend, dogs. We entered a hyper-specialization spiral for every need, including aesthetics, strength, hunting, speed, and fur, giving birth to hundreds of different breeds participating in contests, races, fights, hunting sessions, and so on. To a fault. Actually, most dog breeds now have serious health problems as the breed becomes more pure. Trying to reproduce the highest level of research characteristics led to inbreeding, which led to harmful mutations in various ways depending on the breed, affecting respiratory, muscular, articulation, and eye systems. There's not a part we haven't messed with too much. Still, they stayed by our side. They followed us into farms, cities, wars, and eventually apartments. They became symbols of status, workers, guardians, and companions. And we changed too. Studies show that pet owners, especially dog owners, have lower stress levels, healthier hearts, and even longer lifespans. There's something about living with dogs that's good for us. Maybe it reminds us of who we were. It triggers older instincts, even parenting instincts in some cases, of what we still need: connection, loyalty, unspoken understanding. It's not a coincidence that therapy dogs are used for PTSD, or that they're among the first responders in disaster zones. We're that closely related now. They've been at our side since we huddled in caves, and even now, they're still protecting us, not from saber-tooths, but from the loneliness of modern life. Lands without dogs. But not every culture made that pact. In some parts of the world, humans walked into the future without dogs at their heels, whether by choice, chance, or necessity. Those absences speak volumes about what it really took to build this ancient alliance. While the domestication of dogs began between 20,000 and 30,000 years ago somewhere in Eurasia, the relationship between humans and dogs didn't unfold the same way everywhere. In parts of sub-Saharan Africa, Australia, and parts of the Americas, the adoption of dogs was often slower, partial, or culturally limited. Several factors contributed to this uneven spread. First, ecological constraints played a major role. Research by Gregor Larson and colleagues in the 2012 Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences emphasizes that dog domestication events were regionally specific and that dogs were introduced into Africa rather than domesticated there independently. Environments like tropical forests, arid deserts, and savannas, where traditional hunting relied less on pack, style cooperation, and more on persistence hunting or trapping, made the dog's hunting assistance less critical. In many African societies, traditional survival strategies like long-distance endurance running, as discussed in Dr. Liebenberg's 2006 work on persistence hunting, were already extremely effective without dogs. Second, disease ecology was a serious barrier. A 2018 study in Ecology and Evolution by Walker et al. Points out that canine diseases like rabies, distemper, and parvovirus have long histories in Africa, where high pathogen loads could make keeping dogs risky. In regions where zoonotic disease threats were already high, dogs could be seen more as disease vectors than as companions. Culturally, anthropologists like Robert K. Hitchcock and Marlene Martin documented in 2010 African study monographs that in many hunter-gatherer societies of southern Africa, like the Sand Peoples, dogs were used mainly for practical purposes like assisting in small game hunting, but were not treated as household companions in the emotional sense common in Eurasian societies. In many Bantu-speaking agricultural communities, dogs were tolerated but viewed as spiritually ambiguous, sometimes linked with impurity or scavenging, as noted by E. Evans Pritchard in his classic ethnography, The Newer, from 1940. In Australia, dingoes, Canis lupus dingo, believed to have arrived about 500 to 4,000 years ago via seafaring humans, present a slightly different case. As shown in studies by Savalainen et al. In the 2004 Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, dingoes were never fully domesticated. Aboriginal Australians often lived alongside dingoes, sometimes raising pups, but dingoes largely remained semi-wild, not undergoing the strong anatomical and behavioral changes associated with true domestication. They were valuable hunting allies and spiritual figures, but not deeply integrated into human households like Eurasian dogs. In the Americas, archaeological work by Angela Perry, published in 2019 in Proceedings of the Royal Society B, shows that dogs entered the Americas with the earliest migrations, but their roles varied widely, from sled pullers among Arctic peoples to sacrificial animals in Mesoamerica. Companionate relationships existed but weren't universal. In many societies, dogs were primarily functional. In short ecological conditions, pre-existing hunting strategies, disease pressures, and cultural worldviews all shaped how, and whether, dogs became fully integrated into human societies. While the human-dog partnership was transformative where it took root, it was not inevitable, nor was it uniformly embraced across the globe. The ones who tried to go back. So, human societies pre-existed before the coming of dogs, and could probably exist without them anyway. But what would become of dogs without us? Could they ever go back? The short answer is not easily. When modern dogs find themselves without humans, whether abandoned, lost, or born feral, they struggle to truly reclaim the old life of their ancestors. Take the feral dogs of Chernobyl. After the 1986 nuclear disaster, when humans evacuated the area, thousands of pets were left behind. You might think the dogs would simply revert to being wolves, reclaim the forests, and rebuild packs, but they didn't. Instead, they formed loose, scavenging groups around the ruins of human settlements. Their survival depended less on hunting large game and more on picking through what humans left behind. Even decades later, the dogs of Chernobyl remain smaller, less cohesive, and far less wild than true wolves. They're caught in a kind of evolutionary limbo, too domesticated to thrive as apex predators, yet too wild to fully reintegrate with people. It's a pattern seen all over the world. Feral street dogs in India, Africa, and South America don't form tight, hierarchical packs like wolves. They form loose, unstable groups. Australian dingoes, originally domestic dogs brought by humans, managed to rewild, but it took thousands of years, and even today, pure dingoes are vulnerable to dilution from modern dogs. The truth is, once the ancient deal was made, there was no going back. Domestication isn't just a change of lifestyle, it's a change of biology. Dogs are not wolves in costume. They're a new creature entirely, one whose fate is forever entangled with ours. That bond, once forged in the flickering firelight of a Paleolithic camp, still holds. A debt we still owe. So next time you see a dog curled at someone's feet, bounding after a ball, ears perked at the sound of a voice, remember that's not just a pet. That's the descendant of a hunter who made a choice, a species that walked away from the wild to walk beside us, or perhaps was taken from it. Really, no one knows. But in doing so, they didn't just survive, they helped us thrive and become who we are. The story of humanity isn't just written in stone and fire, it's written in paw prints as well. Because 30,000 years ago, when the cold was biting and the night was long, one animal crept closer to the fire and changed everything. That's the story of the prehistoric deal that changed everything. Not carved in stone, but written in loyalty, instinct, and in the eyes of the animal that chose to walk with us. From guarding our fires to guarding our hearts, dogs didn't just adapt to our world, they helped build it, and we've never stopped evolving together. If this kind of deep dive into the forgotten forces that shaped us speaks to you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. It really helps more people find these stories that deserve to be remembered. And if you want to understand why we were even worth following in the first place, check out our last video, The Long Silence, where we trace the stillness, the waiting, and the quiet shaping of our minds and myths before the first words were ever spoken. Until then, stay curious, stay human, and maybe take a moment to thank the creature who's been waiting by the door for 30,000 years. Till next time, keep listening to the echoes.